Simone could feel 12 pairs of eyes burning into her skin as she sat on her own couch in her own home, feeling like a criminal on trial. Her husband Brandon's entire family had shown up unannounced an hour ago, filling her living room with their presence and their judgment. His mother Diane sat across from her with arms crossed. His brother Jerome stood by the doorway like a guard. His cousins, his aunt, his uncle, even his grandmother had come, all arranged in a semicircle that felt designed to intimidate. "We're just concerned about you, sweetheart," Diane said, her voice dripping with fake concern that made Simone's stomach turn. "You've been so secretive about this inheritance situation." Simone gripped her coffee cup tighter. "It's not a situation. It's my inheritance from my aunt. It's personal." "But you're married to our Brandon," Uncle Fred chimed in, his large frame taking up half the love seat. "What's yours is his. That's how marriage works." Brandon sat next to his mother, looking at Simone with an expression she didn't recognize. There was coldness there, calculation. This wasn't the man she'd married 5 years ago. That man had been warm and supportive when she'd grieved losing the parents she barely remembered. That man had held her when she cried about her difficult childhood. This man looked at her like she was an obstacle. "The inheritance is specifically designated to me alone," Simone said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Aunt Dorothy made that very clear in her will. It's protected under inheritance law." "See, this is what we're talking about," Jerome said, shaking his head. "You've already been talking to lawyers without even discussing it with your husband. That's not how family operates." "Family?" Simone felt something crack inside her chest. "Where was this family when I was working 2 jobs to help Brandon start his business? Where was this family when I paid our rent for 3 years while he found himself?" "That's different," Diane said sharply. "That was your duty as his wife. But when I inherit money that my aunt, who actually raised me, left specifically to me, suddenly I'm supposed to just hand it over?" "Not hand it over," Brandon finally spoke, his voice measured and calm in a way that felt rehearsed. "Share it. Invest it in our future. I have business opportunities that could triple that money. My family has connections that could help us. But you're being selfish." Simone looked at the man she'd shared a bed with for 5 years and barely recognized him. $2 million is what Aunt Dorothy left me. She worked her whole life as a nurse, saved every penny, invested wisely. She wanted me to be secure. She knew how hard my life had been. "And you don't think your husband deserves security too?" Diane asked. "After everything he's done for you?" Simone almost laughed. Everything he'd done for her? She'd supported him financially, emotionally, in every possible way. She'd put her own dreams of going back to school on hold. She'd worked overtime at the hospital where she was a medical technician to cover his failed business ventures. And now they sat here acting like she owed them. "I'm not giving anyone my inheritance," Simone said firmly. "It's not up for discussion." The room erupted. Everyone talked at once, voices rising and overlapping. They called her ungrateful. They said she changed. They insisted she was being influenced by the wrong people. Simone sat there, her heart pounding, feeling like she was watching a mob turn on her. "Enough." Brandon's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone went silent. He stood up, towering over Simone where she sat. "I've tried to be patient. I've tried to be understanding. But clearly you're not going to see reason." "Reason?" Simone stood up too, refusing to be looked down on in her own home. "You mean agreeing to whatever you want?" "I mean recognizing that we're a team. That what affects you affects me. That your money is our money." "But my debt was never your debt, was it?" Simone shot back. "When I had student loans, those were mine to pay. When I had medical bills from that car accident, those were mine to handle. But my inheritance is suddenly ours?" "You're being ridiculous," Diane said. "Brandon has stood by you. The least you can do is show some appreciation." "I have appreciated him. I've shown it every single day for 5 years. But this inheritance isn't about appreciation. It's about my aunt's wishes and my financial security." "You've already been to a lawyer, haven't you?" Jerome asked, his eyes narrowing. "You've hidden the money away where Brandon can't touch it." "I've protected what's legally mine, yes." "See." Brandon turned to his family. "I told you. She's already moved against me. She's treating me like an enemy instead of her husband. Because you're treating my inheritance like a prize you're entitled to." Simone felt tears of frustration burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. These people would see tears as weakness, as manipulation tactics. "If you loved me, you'd be happy for me. You'd understand that this money represents my aunt's love and care. You'd respect that. If you loved him," Diane said coldly, "you'd want to invest in his future. In your future together. We have a future together that doesn't require my inheritance. Brandon has a job. I have a job. We were fine before this money. Fine isn't great, Brandon said. Fine isn't the life I want. We could buy a bigger house, start a real business, travel, have the life we deserve. But you'd rather hoard it like some greedy? Don't finish that sentence, Simone warned, her voice low and dangerous. The room went quiet again. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Simone looked at each face and saw the same thing. They thought she was wrong. They thought she was the villain in this story. Not one person in this room was on her side. I think everyone should leave, Simone said quietly. This is my home and I'm asking you all to leave. Our home, Brandon corrected. I pay half the rent. Actually, I pay 2/3 of the rent. I have the bank statements to prove it. Just like I've paid 2/3 of everything for our entire marriage. So yes, my home. And I want you all to leave. No one moved. They all looked at Brandon as if waiting for permission. That small gesture told Simone everything she needed to know. This had been planned. This ambush had been coordinated. They'd come here with a purpose and they weren't leaving until they'd achieved it. Look, Simone, Brandon's voice softened and he reached for her hand. She pulled away. Baby, I know this is overwhelming. I know my family can be intense. But we're just trying to help. Let's table this discussion for now. Think about what we've said. Really think about what's best for us. I have thought about it. The answer is no. Brandon's jaw clenched. The mask of patience slipped for just a second, and Simone saw something ugly underneath. Then his mother spoke and everything changed. Well, Tiffany agrees with us, Diane said matter-of-factly. She thinks Simone is being completely unreasonable. The room went absolutely silent. Every single person froze. Jerome's eyes went wide. Uncle Fred looked at Diane in shock. Brandon's face drained of color. Who? Simone said slowly, her heart starting to pound for an entirely different reason. Is Tiffany? Diane's hand flew to her mouth. She looked at Brandon, realizing her mistake too late. The other family members suddenly couldn't meet Simone's eyes. Who is Tiffany? Simone asked again, louder this time. Brandon's face had gone from pale to red. Mom, what are you doing? I thought she knew, Diane stammered. I thought you'd told her by now. Told me what? Simone felt the room starting to spin. Brandon, who is Tiffany? The silence stretched out. Simone watched her husband struggle to find words, watched his family members exchange guilty glances, and she knew. Without him saying a single word, she knew. Get out, Simone said quietly. All of you. Get out of my house right now. Simone, let me explain, Brandon started. Get out. Simone's voice cracked like thunder. Get out before I call the police and have you all removed for harassment. They filed out slowly, shamefully. All except Brandon, who stood there looking at her with an expression that might have been regret or might have been frustration at a plan gone wrong. We'll talk about this later, he said. No, Simone replied. We won't. Pack a bag. You can stay with your mother since she seems to know all about your life. You have 1 hour and then I'm changing the locks. Brandon opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He walked past her to their bedroom without another word. Simone stood alone in her living room, shaking. The name echoed in her head, Tiffany. Her husband had another woman in his life. A woman his family knew about. A woman who had opinions about Simone's inheritance. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She had exactly 1 hour to make some calls. 1 hour before Brandon came back. 1 hour to figure out what to do next. But as she stared at her phone, one thing became crystal clear. Whatever happened next, she was done being ambushed. Done being manipulated. Done being treated like her own money wasn't hers to control. The inheritance had revealed the truth about her marriage. Now it was time to figure out what to do with that truth. 3 months earlier, Simone had been folding laundry in the small apartment she shared with Brandon when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Is this Simone Baker? A woman's voice, professional and somber. Yes, this is she. This is Patricia Chen from Henderson and Associates law firm. I'm calling regarding your aunt, Dorothy Mitchell. Simone's heart dropped. Is she okay? I'm very sorry to inform you that Ms. Mitchell passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 nights ago. The laundry basket slipped from Simone's hands. Aunt Dorothy. The woman who had taken in a scared 8-year-old girl after her parents died in a car crash. The woman who had raised her, put her through school, taught her to be strong. Gone. I'm so sorry for your loss, Patricia continued. Ms. Mitchell listed you as her sole heir and requested that I contact you personally regarding her estate. The funeral had been small. Aunt Dorothy had been a private person with few close friends, most of whom had passed themselves. Simone had sat in the front row of the church, Brandon beside her, as the pastor spoke about a woman who had dedicated her life to nursing and to raising her niece alone. Brandon had been supportive those first few days. He'd held her while she cried. He'd helped with funeral arrangements. He'd taken time off work to be with her. Simone had felt grateful to have him. Then came the reading of the will. Patricia's office was elegant and calm, designed to deliver life-changing news in the most peaceful setting possible. Simone sat across from the lawyer, Brandon's hand in hers, as Patricia explained Aunt Dorothy's estate. Your aunt was an extremely savvy investor, Patricia said, sliding documents across her desk. She lived modestly, but she invested her nursing salary wisely for over 40 years. The total estate value is approximately $2 million. Simone's breath caught. $2 million. Yes. She left specific instructions. The entire estate goes to you, Simone. There's a trust set up that protects it as your separate property, not marital property. She was very clear about that. Simone felt Brandon's hand tighten on hers. She looked at him and saw something flicker across his face. Surprise? Excitement? She couldn't quite read it. She left you a letter, Patricia said, handing over a sealed envelope. She wanted you to read it in private. That night, Simone sat alone in their bedroom and opened Aunt Dorothy's letter. Her aunt's neat handwriting filled 2 pages. My dearest Simone, it began. If you're reading this, I've gone on to whatever comes next. Don't be sad for too long, baby girl. I've lived a full life, and my only regret is that I won't be here to see all the amazing things you're going to do. I'm leaving you everything I have because you are my daughter in every way that matters. You brought so much joy to my life when I needed it most. Raising you was my greatest privilege. I've set up this money as your separate property because I learned some hard lessons in my own marriage. Love is beautiful, but money can reveal people's true character. This inheritance is your security, your freedom, your foundation. Never let anyone convince you that you owe them your security. Build the life you want. Go back to school if that's still your dream. Travel. Start a business. Whatever calls to your heart. But promise me this, Simone. Don't let anyone guilt you or pressure you into giving away your foundation. This is yours. You've earned it through every sacrifice you made, every hard day you survived, every time you chose kindness over bitterness. I love you forever, Aunt Dorothy. Simone had cried reading it, understanding the weight of her aunt's wisdom. Aunt Dorothy had been married once, briefly in her 20s. She never talked much about it except to say that she'd learned important lessons about independence. When Simone came out of the bedroom, Brandon was waiting with takeout and champagne. We should celebrate, he said, grinning. $2 million, Simone. Do you know what we could do with that? It's my inheritance, Simone said carefully. Aunt Dorothy left it specifically to me. Right, yeah, of course. But we're married. We'll figure out the best way to use it together, right? Something in his tone made Simone uneasy, but she pushed the feeling down. Let's not think about it tonight. I just want to remember Aunt Dorothy. But Brandon couldn't let it go. Over dinner, he talked about investment opportunities his cousin had mentioned. About a bigger apartment they could afford. About finally starting the consulting business he'd always dreamed of. Brandon, I need time to process all this, Simone finally said. My aunt just died. I know, baby. I know. I'm just excited for us, that's all. But the conversations didn't stop. The next day, Brandon casually mentioned that his brother Jerome knew a great financial advisor. The day after that, he suggested they meet with a real estate agent. Every conversation somehow circled back to the money. Simone started to notice other changes too. Brandon began dressing better, talking about luxury cars he wanted to test drive. He made comments about their apartment being too small, their furniture too cheap. He started looking at her differently, like she was a winning lottery ticket instead of his wife. One evening, 2 weeks after the funeral, Simone came home from her shift at the hospital to find Brandon on the phone in their bedroom. She heard him say, "Trust me, it's going to work out. $2 million is more than enough for what we need." When he noticed her in the doorway, he quickly said goodbye and hung up. Who was that? Simone asked. Just Jerome. We were talking about some business stuff. Business stuff involving $2 million? Brandon laughed, but it sounded forced. Come on, don't be paranoid. I'm excited about our future. Is that a crime? It's not our money, Brandon. It's my inheritance. His smile faded. Are you seriously going to be like that? Be like what? Honest about the legal reality? Married people share everything, Simone. That's how it works. That's not how inheritance works. Aunt Dorothy set it up specifically as my separate property. Why would she do that? Unless she was trying to cause problems in our marriage. Simone felt anger flash through her. Don't you dare speak badly about her. She was protecting me. Protecting you from what? From your husband? Maybe she knew something I didn't. Brandon's face darkened. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Forget it. I'm tired. But the tension only grew. Brandon became distant and moody. He stopped being affectionate. He spent more time on his phone, always angling the screen away from her. When Simone tried to talk to him about it, he accused her of being suspicious and controlling. This money has changed you, he said one night after another argument. I haven't changed at all. I'm the same person I was before. No, you're not. You're secretive and paranoid. You're keeping things from me. We used to be a team and now you act like I'm your enemy. I'm not keeping anything from you. I just haven't decided what to do with the inheritance yet. Why is that such a problem? Because you should want to include me in these decisions. We're supposed to be partners. Simone stared at him. We are partners. But this is my inheritance from my aunt. It doesn't change who we are or what we have together. It changes everything if you're going to hoard it like some kind of dragon. The words stung. Simone had never been selfish or materialistic. She'd supported Brandon through every failed venture. She'd worked overtime to cover their bills when his business ideas didn't pan out. She'd given up her own dreams of nursing school because they couldn't afford it. And now he was calling her a hoarder because she wanted to think carefully about $2 million her aunt had saved over 40 years of hard work. I need some air, she said and walked out. She drove to the park where Aunt Dorothy used to take her as a child. Sat on the same bench where her aunt had told her stories about the patients she'd helped, the lives she'd touched. Aunt Dorothy had been so wise, so careful with money, so independent. Simone pulled out her phone and called Patricia, the lawyer. I need your advice, Simone said. How do I protect this inheritance? It's already protected under the trust structure your aunt set up, Patricia explained. As long as you keep it in separate accounts under your name only, never commingle it with marital funds, and never add your husband's name to anything, it remains your separate property. What if he pressures me to give him access? Don't. The moment you start using that money for joint purposes or adding his name to accounts, you risk it becoming marital property. Your aunt was very clear in her wishes. If you want to honor them, keep everything separate. That conversation had been 6 weeks ago. Since then, Brandon's pressure had only increased. His family had started calling, dropping hints about investment opportunities. His mother had suggested family dinners where the conversation always turned to the inheritance. Brandon had even brought home papers from a financial advisor his cousin knew, papers that would have required Simone's signature to set up joint investment accounts. She'd refused to sign anything. And that refusal had led to more arguments, more coldness, more distance between them. Now, standing in her living room with divorce papers in her hand and the name Tiffany ringing in her ears, Simone finally understood Aunt Dorothy's warning. Money had revealed Brandon's true character. And the truth was devastating. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should give him what he wants. It's only going to get worse. Simone's hand shook. Who was this? Another family member? Or was it Tiffany? She blocked the number and sat down on her couch, Aunt Dorothy's letter still in her purse. She pulled it out and read it again, especially the last part. Don't let anyone guilt you or pressure you into giving away your foundation. I won't, Aunt Dorothy, Simone whispered. I promise. She opened her laptop and began searching for the best divorce lawyers in the city. If Brandon wanted a war over her inheritance, he was going to find out that Simone Baker was her aunt's niece through and through. And Dorothy Mitchell had been one tough woman. Simone sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment, laptop open, hands shaking slightly as she waited. She'd called a private investigator that morning, someone Patricia the lawyer had recommended. A woman named Ruth who'd been doing this work for 20 years. Ruth arrived exactly on time, a short woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She slid into the booth across from Simone and got straight to business. Tell me what you need. Simone explained everything. The family meeting. The pressure about the inheritance. And the name that had slipped from her mother-in-law's mouth. Tiffany. I need to know who she is, Simone said. And I need to know what my husband has been doing behind my back. Ruth pulled out a tablet and took notes. How long have you suspected something? I didn't suspect anything until yesterday. I thought the problems in our marriage were about money. Now I think the money was just an excuse. It usually is, Ruth said. Give me his full name, his workplace, his phone number if you have access, email addresses, social media accounts, anything that might help. Simone provided everything. Ruth promised to have preliminary information within 48 hours and full results within a week. This won't be cheap, Ruth warned. But if he's hiding something, I'll find it. Cost doesn't matter. I need the truth. The next 48 hours were the longest of Simone's life. Brandon had taken her ultimatum seriously and moved out. He'd packed 3 suitcases and left without much argument, which itself felt suspicious. She'd expected him to fight harder, to demand his rights as her husband. Instead, he'd gone quietly, which meant he was planning something. She changed the locks anyway. Changed all her passwords. Checked her credit report and found 3 credit cards she hadn't opened. Brandon had been using her social security number to open accounts in her name. The balances totaled $47,000. Simone called Patricia immediately. That's identity theft and fraud, Patricia said. You need to report this to the police and the credit bureaus right away. But he's my husband. That doesn't give him the right to steal your identity. File a police report, Simone. Document everything. Simone spent that afternoon at the police station, filing reports and feeling like her entire world was crumbling. The officer taking her statement was sympathetic but matter-of-fact. This happens more than you'd think, he said. Spouses assume they can use each other's information freely. But this is serious fraud. Those credit cards, did you benefit from them at all? I didn't even know they existed. Then you're a victim of identity theft. We'll investigate, but you should also contact an attorney about the divorce and criminal aspects. When Ruth called 2 days later, Simone was almost afraid to answer. I found your Tiffany, Ruth said without preamble. Tiffany Reynolds, age 32. She works as a receptionist at a dental office in Westbrook. She's been seeing your husband for approximately 8 months. 8 months. While Simone had been mourning her aunt, planning the funeral, dealing with the inheritance, Brandon had been building a whole separate life. How did they meet? Simone asked, her voice hollow. Social media appears to be. They connected on a dating app, actually. Brandon's profile says he's separated. He told her we were separated? 8 months ago? According to the messages I found, yes. He's been telling her the marriage has been over for a year, that you're controlling and difficult, and that you're keeping him trapped financially. Simone felt sick. What else? You want the full details? Everything. Ruth's voice was gentle but direct. They've been meeting 2 or 3 times a week at her apartment. He's told her about the inheritance. Actually, from the messages, it looks like he told her about it before you even received it. He knew it was coming. That felt like a punch to the gut. How could he have known? Did your aunt ever mention her will to him? Simone thought back. Had Aunt Dorothy ever said anything in front of Brandon? She'd visited them occasionally for dinner. Had something been mentioned? Then she remembered. 6 months ago, Aunt Dorothy had been at their apartment for Sunday dinner. She'd looked frail, tired. She'd pulled Simone aside and said quietly, I've updated my will, baby girl. Everything's taken care of. You'll be secure when I'm gone. Brandon had been in the kitchen, supposedly out of earshot. But their apartment was small. He could have heard. He knew, Simone said quietly. He heard my aunt mention updating her will. He knew 6 months ago. That explains the timeline, Ruth said. The affair started shortly after that. And Simone, there's more. The messages between him and Tiffany, they're not just romantic. They're strategic. They've been planning. Planning what? How to get the inheritance. There are messages where they discuss divorce settlement amounts, legal strategies, ways to prove the money should be considered marital property. Tiffany apparently has a friend who's a paralegal, and they've been getting advice. Simone's vision blurred with tears. So this was all a plan? The affair, the pressure about the money, all of it? It appears so. And Simone, your mother-in-law is in on it. There are messages between Brandon and his mother discussing the best way to pressure you. They planned that family meeting. It was supposed to intimidate you into giving up the money. Why? Why would his mother help him do this to me? From what I can see in the messages, she's promised a portion of the money. Brandon told her he'd give her $200,000 once he got access to the inheritance. He's made similar promises to his brother. Simone felt like she couldn't breathe. The betrayal wasn't just Brandon. It was his entire family. They'd sat in her living room, looked her in the eye, and lied to her. All while planning to steal from her. What about Tiffany? Simone asked. What does she get out of this? Brandon's promised to marry her once the divorce is final. He's told her they'll split the inheritance and start a business together. Some kind of consulting firm. Apparently that's been his dream, and he sees your inheritance as startup capital. My inheritance? From my aunt. The woman who raised me. Simone was crying now, angry tears running down her face. He was going to take the money my aunt saved for 40 years and use it to start a business with his girlfriend? Yes. I'm sorry, Simone. I know this is painful. What else? Is there anything else I need to know? Ruth hesitated. There's one more thing. Tiffany isn't his first affair. I found evidence of at least 2 other women over the course of your marriage. Neither relationship lasted more than a few months, and there's no indication they were financial targets. This thing with Tiffany is different. This is calculated. Simone ended the call and sat in her apartment in complete silence. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of believing she knew this man. 5 years of supporting his dreams, covering his failures, being his partner. And all of it had been a lie. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. We need to talk. I think we both said things we regret. Can we meet? Simone stared at the message. She thought about what Ruth had told her. The planning, the scheming, the cold calculation behind every word of concern, every plea for understanding. He wanted to meet so he could try another angle. Another manipulation. She typed back, no. Then she called Ruth. I need copies of everything you found. Every message, every piece of evidence. I want documentation of all of it. Already putting together a file for you. I'll email it within the hour. What are you going to do? I'm going to protect myself. And then I'm going to make sure he doesn't get away with this. When Ruth's email arrived, Simone spent 3 hours reading through everything. The messages between Brandon and Tiffany were sickening. He called Simone controlling, bitter, difficult. He said she'd changed since her aunt died, become obsessed with money. He painted himself as a victim stuck in a loveless marriage with a selfish woman. The messages with his mother were even worse. Diane had suggested specific pressure tactics. She'd recommended bringing the whole family to show Simone how serious we are. She'd even suggested that Brandon should threaten divorce as a negotiation tactic, assuming Simone would cave rather than end the marriage. But the worst messages were the ones where Brandon and Tiffany celebrated their brilliant plan. Where they talked about the life they'd build with Simone's money. Where they laughed about how naive Simone was, how easy it would be to manipulate her. One message from Brandon to Tiffany, sent just 3 days after Aunt Dorothy's funeral, read, "She's devastated right now. Perfect time to start pushing for joint accounts. She'll want to feel like we're a team. Strike while she's vulnerable." Simone read that message 5 times, each time feeling more fury build in her chest. He'd used her grief as a weapon. He'd seen her pain as an opportunity. She opened her laptop and started a new document. At the top, she wrote, "Evidence of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy." Then she began organizing everything Ruth had sent, everything she'd discovered, every piece of documentation she had. Brandon wanted her inheritance? He was going to get a court case instead. And by the time she was done, he'd be lucky if he wasn't in jail. Her phone rang. Patricia, the lawyer. "I heard from the police," Patricia said. "They're taking the identity theft seriously. But Simone, you need to hire a criminal defense attorney to help navigate this. What Brandon did is serious." "I know. And I have evidence of more than just the credit cards. Can you recommend someone who handles complex fraud cases?" "I can. But Simone, are you sure you want to go this route? Prosecuting your husband will be difficult emotionally." Simone looked at the messages on her screen. At the plans to steal from her. At the affair. At the cold manipulation of her grief. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said. "Then let's go to war," Patricia replied. Simone met with Patricia and a criminal attorney named Michael Torres in Patricia's office 2 days later. She brought her laptop, 2 flash drives with copied evidence, and a binder containing printed versions of everything Ruth had found. Michael was in his mid-40s, with gray temples and an intense focus that made Simone feel like she was being taken seriously. He spent an hour reviewing all the evidence without saying a word, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Finally he looked up. "This is substantial. Not only do you have evidence of identity theft with the credit cards, but these messages show premeditation and conspiracy. That's serious criminal exposure for your husband. What kind of charges are we talking about?" Simone asked. "Identity theft, credit card fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly wire fraud if he used electronic means to access your accounts or attempt to access your inheritance. Each of these carries significant penalties. Will it stick? He's going to say he had permission because we're married. The credit cards won't fly with that defense. You reported them, you have no history of using them, and they were opened without your knowledge. The conspiracy aspect is trickier, but these messages are damning. He's literally discussing how to illegally access your inheritance. Patricia leaned forward. What about the civil side? The divorce? With this evidence, the divorce is straightforward. No judge is going to award him any portion of the inheritance given the circumstances. In fact, Simone might have grounds to sue him for emotional distress and fraud. I don't want his money, Simone said. I just want him away from mine. Michael smiled slightly. That's refreshing. Most people in your position want revenge. I want justice. There's a difference. Over the next week, Michael and Patricia worked together to build a comprehensive legal strategy. First, they filed for a restraining order to prevent Brandon from contacting Simone or attempting to access any accounts in her name. The judge granted it immediately based on the identity theft evidence. Then they filed formal criminal complaints with the police, providing all the evidence Ruth had gathered. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Sandra Lopez, called Simone in for an interview. I've seen a lot of financial fraud cases, Detective Lopez said. But I have to tell you, the level of planning here is unusual. Your husband and this woman put real thought into this. What happens next? Simone asked. We'll investigate. Interview witnesses, subpoena records, build a case. It'll take time, but with the evidence you've provided, we have a solid foundation. What about his family? His mother and brother were involved in the planning. If we can prove they were active participants in the conspiracy, they could face charges too. The messages between your husband and his mother are certainly suggestive, but we'll need more. That gave Simone an idea. She called Ruth again. I need you to find out everything you can about Brandon's family. Financial records, criminal history, anything that might show a pattern of this kind of behavior. Ruth called back 3 days later with information that made Simone's blood run cold. Diane, your mother-in-law, she's been sued twice for financial exploitation. Once by an elderly woman she worked for as a caregiver, and once by her own sister. Both cases settled out of court, but the allegations were similar. She manipulated vulnerable people out of money. So this is what she does? It appears to be a pattern. And get this, Jerome, your husband's brother, was charged with fraud 5 years ago for a fake investment scheme. He pleaded down to a misdemeanor and got probation, but the charges were serious. They're a family of con artists. That's not legally provable, but there's certainly a pattern of financially questionable behavior across the family. Armed with this new information, Simone met with Detective Lopez again. The detective's eyes widened as she reviewed the additional evidence. This changes things. If the family has a history of this behavior, it strengthens the conspiracy case significantly. I'll need to bring in a financial crimes specialist. While the criminal investigation progressed, Patricia filed the divorce petition. Brandon's response came within a week, and it was exactly what Simone expected. He claimed the marriage was irretrievably broken, that Simone had become mentally unstable after her aunt's death, and that he was entitled to half the inheritance as marital property. He also filed a motion for temporary spousal support, claiming he couldn't afford his living expenses without access to Simone's income. He's got some nerve, Patricia said when she saw the filings. He commits fraud, gets caught, and now wants you to support him financially? What do? We respond with everything we have. And Simone, I think it's time we depose Brandon and Tiffany. Let's put them under oath and see how their story holds up. The deposition was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Simone went back to work at the hospital, trying to maintain some normalcy in her life. But word had gotten around about her situation, and her co-workers were supportive. Several of them shared their own stories of financial betrayal and bad divorces. You're doing the right thing, her supervisor told her during a break. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. The night before Brandon's deposition, Simone couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about seeing him again, about hearing him lie under oath, about facing the reality of what her marriage had become. Her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. A text from an unknown number: drop the charges. You're making a mistake. Then another: we can work this out. Don't destroy Brandon's life over money. Then a third: you'll regret this. Simone screenshot each message and sent them to Detective Lopez. The response came quickly: those messages might constitute witness intimidation. Keep sending them to me. Don't respond. The deposition took place in Michael Torres's office. Brandon arrived with his own lawyer, a man named Robert Kim, who looked uncomfortable with his client. Tiffany arrived separately with her own representation, a young woman who seemed overwhelmed by the situation. Simone sat in the corner with Patricia and Michael, watching as Brandon was sworn in. He looked different than she remembered. Thinner, more haggard. His confidence seemed forced. Michael started with simple questions. How long had Brandon been married to Simone? When did he first learn about the inheritance? When had his relationship with Tiffany begun? Brandon lied about almost everything. He said the affair started after Simone became obsessed with money. He claimed he didn't know about the inheritance until after Aunt Dorothy died. He insisted the credit cards were a misunderstanding, that he'd thought they were joint cards. Michael smiled slightly and pulled out a binder. Mr. Baker, I'm now showing you text messages between you and Ms. Reynolds dated 8 months ago. In these messages you discuss your wife's inheritance. How could you discuss something you claim you didn't know about? Brandon's face went pale. His lawyer whispered something to him. I want to confer with my counsel. That's your right. But Mr. Baker, perjury is a serious offense. You're under oath. They took a break. Simone watched Brandon and his lawyer argue in hushed tones in the hallway. When they came back, Brandon's entire demeanor had changed. I may have been mistaken about some of the timeline, he said carefully. Mistaken? Or lying? Objection, Robert Kim said. Argumentative. But the damage was done. Michael continued questioning, pulling out message after message, piece of evidence after piece of evidence. By the end of 2 hours, Brandon had contradicted himself at least a dozen times. Tiffany's deposition was even more damaging. She cracked under questioning within 30 minutes, admitting that Brandon had told her about the inheritance early in their relationship, that they'd discussed ways to get the money, that his mother had been involved in planning. Did you know Brandon was still married when you began your relationship with him? Michael asked. He said they were separated, Tiffany said, tears streaming down her face. He said the marriage was over and everything but paperwork. But they were still living together? He said it was temporary. That she wouldn't let him leave until money stuff was settled. So he lied to you too. Tiffany looked at Brandon, who was watching from across the room. I guess he did. After the depositions, Michael pulled Simone aside. We've got him. Between the text messages, the credit card fraud, and his perjury today, the criminal case is solid. And the divorce case is even stronger. What happens now? Now we wait for the prosecutor to decide on charges. But Simone, I'd be surprised if Brandon doesn't face serious criminal penalties. Simone should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. 5 years of her life had been built on lies. The man she trusted had betrayed her in the worst possible way. And now she was watching his entire life collapse because of his own greed and stupidity. But she also felt something else. Relief. Because she was free. The truth was out, documented, undeniable. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd never have to question herself again. She'd done the right thing by protecting her inheritance, by trusting her instincts, by refusing to be manipulated. As she left the office building, her phone rang. It was Detective Lopez. Simone, we've made an arrest. Brandon Baker is being charged with identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The prosecutor is also looking at charges against Diane Baker and Jerome Baker. They'll be arraigned tomorrow. That fast. With the evidence you provided and their own testimony, we had more than enough for probable cause. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Simone stood on the sidewalk, people rushing past her on their way to wherever they were going, and let herself feel it all. The pain of betrayal. The anger at being used. The satisfaction of justice being served. And underneath it all, the beginning of something new. Freedom. Thank you, she told Detective Lopez. For taking this seriously. Thank you for having the courage to come forward. A lot of people don't. As Simone walked to her car, she thought about Aunt Dorothy. About the letter warning her that money reveals people's true character. About the inheritance that had seemed like a blessing but had actually been a test. A test she'd passed. And a gift that had revealed the truth just in time to save her from wasting more years on a man who'd never truly loved her. Simone stood in front of the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The past month had aged her. Dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. Cheekbones more prominent from forgotten meals. But there was something else too. A hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A strength that came from surviving betrayal. Her phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. Meeting at 10 a.m. Bring all documents. Today was the day they'd put together the final strategy for both the criminal case and the divorce proceedings. Simone had spent weeks gathering every piece of evidence, every receipt, every bank statement from their 5-year marriage. She documented everything. She arrived at Patricia's office to find it full. Patricia was there, along with Michael Torres, Detective Lopez, and another woman Simone didn't recognize. Simone, this is Rebecca Chong. She's a forensic accountant who's been reviewing your financial records, Patricia said. Rebecca was young, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and a tablet full of spreadsheets. She shook Simone's hand firmly. I've been going through everything, Rebecca said without preamble. And I have to tell you, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of financial fraud I've ever seen. She pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. Over the course of your marriage, you contributed approximately $280,000 to joint expenses. Brandon contributed around $90,000. That's a 75/25 split, despite you claiming everything was equal. Simone felt her stomach sink. She'd known she paid more, but seeing it laid out in numbers was different. But that's not even the worst part, Rebecca continued. These 3 credit cards opened in your name have a combined balance of $47,000. I tracked the purchases. None of them were for household expenses or anything you'd benefit from. Luxury items mostly. Electronics, designer clothes, expensive dinners. Let me guess, Simone said bitterly. He was buying things for Tiffany. Among others. There are charges at hotels you never stayed at, restaurants in cities you've never visited. He's been using your credit to fund his entire double life. Michael leaned forward. Here's what we're going to do. First, the criminal case. The prosecutor has agreed to charge Brandon with identity theft, credit card fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Those charges alone carry a potential sentence of 5 to 10 years. Will he actually get that? Simone asked. Depends on his criminal history and whether he pleads guilty. First offense usually means a lighter sentence, but the premeditation and the amount of money involved work against him. I'd say he's looking at 2 to 5 years realistically. What about his mother and brother? Diane and Jerome are being charged as co-conspirators. The messages show they were actively involved in planning to defraud you. They'll likely face lesser charges, maybe probation if they cooperate. Detective Lopez spoke up. There's something else. When we arrested Brandon, we found additional evidence on his phone. He'd been researching ways to forge your signature, looking up information about inheritance law, even contacting your bank pretending to be you. He tried to access my inheritance account? Simone felt cold. He tried. The bank flagged it as suspicious because he couldn't answer the security questions. That's actually another charge we're adding, attempted financial fraud. Patricia pulled out a thick folder. On the divorce side, this is going to be straightforward given the circumstances. You have grounds for divorce based on adultery and fraud. The inheritance is completely protected. And given Brandon's criminal activity, I'll be requesting he pay your attorney fees. Will I get anything from him? The money he owes me? Rebecca shook her head. Unfortunately, Brandon has no assets. No savings, no property, nothing of value. You can get a judgment against him for the credit card debt, but collecting will be difficult, especially if he goes to prison. Simone absorbed this. So even if she won, she'd still be out $47,000. Plus legal fees. Plus the emotional cost of everything she'd been through. However, Rebecca continued, I did find something interesting. Brandon's mother Diane owns a rental property. Not in her name directly, but through an LLC that Jerome manages. I think they were planning to hide assets in case of exactly this kind of situation. Can we go after that? Simone asked. Michael nodded. If we can prove the property was purchased with money that was fraudulently obtained, yes. It's complicated, but worth pursuing. They spent the next 3 hours going through every detail of the plan. Timelines for court appearances. Strategy for responding to Brandon's motions. How to handle the media if the case attracted attention. What to expect during trial if it went that far. Most importantly, Patricia said as the meeting wrapped up, you need to take care of yourself, Simone. This process is going to be draining. You need a support system. That was the one thing Simone didn't have. She'd spent so much time working and supporting Brandon that she'd let her friendships fade. Most of her close friends from before the marriage had drifted away. She had co-workers who were supportive, but no one she could really lean on. I'll manage, Simone said. After the meeting, Detective Lopez pulled her aside. I wanted to give you a heads up. Brandon's attorney is pushing for a plea deal. He wants the charges reduced in exchange for a guilty plea. What do you think I should do? That's not my call. But personally, I think he should face the full consequences of what he did. He didn't just steal from you. He planned it, executed it, and involved his whole family. That's not a moment of weakness. That's a pattern of behavior. Simone thought about the messages she'd read. The cold calculation. The jokes about her naivety. The celebration of manipulating her grief. No deal, she said firmly. He takes this to trial or pleads to the full charges. That's what I hoped you'd say. That evening, Simone sat in her apartment, surrounded by legal documents and evidence binders. Her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize, but she answered anyway. Simone. A woman's voice, hesitant. Who is this? It's Lauren. Jerome's wife. I don't know if you remember me. Simone did remember her vaguely. A quiet woman who'd been at a few family gatherings, always in the background. What do you want? I need to talk to you. In person. Please. It's important. Something in Lauren's voice made Simone agree to meet. They chose a public place, a busy coffee shop downtown. Lauren was already there when Simone arrived, looking nervous and exhausted. Thank you for coming, Lauren said. I know you have no reason to trust anyone in Brandon's family right now. You're right. I don't. So why did you want to meet? Lauren pulled out a folder. Because I want to help you. Jerome and Diane, they've done this before. Not exactly like this, but similar. They find vulnerable people and take advantage. It's how they operate. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of being part of it. And because they're trying to drag me into this mess. They want me to lie for them, to say I was with Jerome when he was actually meeting with Brandon. I won't do it. What's in the folder? Documentation of their other schemes. A woman Diane took money from 3 years ago. An investment scam Jerome ran that he avoided prosecution for by paying people off. A pattern of behavior that shows this isn't a one-time thing. Simone looked through the documents. Bank transfers, threatening messages, settlement agreements. It was damning. Why are you giving this to me instead of the police? Because I'm giving it to them too. I already talked to Detective Lopez. But I wanted you to have copies. I wanted you to know that you're not crazy, you're not wrong, and you didn't do anything to deserve what they did to you. Tears pricked at Simone's eyes. It was the first time anyone from Brandon's family had acknowledged the truth without trying to manipulate her. Thank you, she said quietly. There's one more thing, Lauren said. Tiffany isn't the first woman Brandon did this with. There was another woman 2 years ago. Her name was Angela. Brandon convinced her to lend him money to start a business. She gave him $15,000. He never paid her back and blocked her when she tried to contact him. Do you know where I can find Angela? Lauren slid a piece of paper across the table. Her contact information. She might be willing to testify about his pattern of behavior. After Lauren left, Simone sat in the coffee shop for a long time, thinking. This wasn't just about her inheritance anymore. It was about stopping people who'd made a career out of exploiting others. People who saw kindness as weakness and trust as an opportunity. She called Michael Torres. I have new evidence. A lot of it. And I have a witness who can testify about Brandon's history of financial fraud. I think we need to meet again. How soon can you get to my office? I'm on my way. As Simone drove through the city, she thought about Aunt Dorothy. About the 40 years of hard work that had created the inheritance. About the wisdom that had protected it from people like Brandon. About the strength it took to live independently, to trust your instincts, to refuse to be manipulated. Aunt Dorothy had left her more than money. She'd left her a foundation to stand on. And Simone was going to make sure that foundation was used to stop people like Brandon from hurting anyone else. The war was far from over. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Simone felt like she was winning. The courtroom was cold and impersonal, all wood paneling and harsh fluorescent lights. Simone sat at the plaintiff's table with Patricia and Michael, watching as Brandon entered with his attorney. He didn't look at her. Didn't acknowledge her existence. After 5 years of marriage, she'd become invisible to him. Today was the emergency hearing for temporary orders in the divorce. Patricia had filed for exclusive possession of the marital apartment, protection of all assets, and enforcement of the restraining order. Brandon's attorney was arguing that Brandon should be allowed back into the home, that the restraining order was punitive, and that Simone was being vindictive. Judge Morrison, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense expression, listened to both sides. Then she looked directly at Brandon. Mr. Baker, I've reviewed the evidence in this case. The credit card fraud, the text messages, the testimony from your deposition. Can you give me one good reason why I should allow you anywhere near Ms. Mitchell? Brandon's attorney stood up quickly. Your Honor, those are criminal allegations that haven't been proven. My client hasn't been convicted of anything. He's been charged with multiple felonies and there's substantial evidence supporting those charges. Ms. Mitchell has a right to feel safe in her own home. The temporary restraining order stands, and I'm granting her exclusive possession of the marital residence. Furthermore, all joint accounts are to be frozen pending the outcome of the divorce. Mr. Baker, you're not to contact Ms. Mitchell directly for any reason. All communication goes through attorneys. Am I clear? Yes, Your Honor, Brandon said quietly. Simone felt a wave of relief. She'd been terrified the judge would be sympathetic to Brandon, would believe his claims that she was overreacting. But Judge Morrison had seen through him immediately. Outside the courtroom, Patricia squeezed her shoulder. That went as well as it possibly could have. You're protected now. But protection on paper didn't stop the harassment. Over the next week, Simone received anonymous calls at all hours. Someone left a dead rose on her car windshield. She found her tires slashed one morning. Each incident was reported to Detective Lopez, but proving who was responsible was difficult. It's most likely Brandon or his family, Detective Lopez said. But without evidence I can't do much. Are you feeling safe? I'm being careful. Looking over my shoulder constantly. It's exhausting. That's the point. They want to wear you down, make you feel like it's not worth fighting. Don't let them win. Simone refused to be intimidated. She installed security cameras outside her apartment. Changed her daily routines. Varied her routes to work. Started taking self-defense classes. If Brandon wanted to make her afraid, he was going to fail. At work, things were complicated. Her supervisor was supportive, but Simone could feel other people whispering. Some thought she was brave. Others thought she was vindictive. One coworker had the nerve to say, "Maybe you should just give him some money and move on. Is it really worth all this?" Simone had stared at her. He committed fraud. He stole my identity. He planned to take money my aunt saved for 40 years. And you think I should just hand it over to make peace? The coworker had backed down quickly, but the comment stuck with Simone. Was she being unreasonable? Should she just settle, give Brandon something to make this all go away? Then she'd remember the messages. The cold planning. The jokes at her expense. The way he'd used her grief as a weapon. And she'd know she was doing the right thing. A week after the court hearing, Simone got a call from Angela, the woman Lauren had told her about. The woman Brandon had scammed 2 years ago. I heard about what he did to you, Angela said. And I want to help. I should have reported him back then, but I was embarrassed. I felt stupid for trusting him. You weren't stupid. He's a professional con artist. Can I ask you something? Did he tell you he loved you? Did he make you feel like you were special, like you were the only person who really understood him? Yes, Simone said quietly. All of that. He said the same things to me. And I bet he said them to Tiffany too. It's his pattern. Find a woman, make her fall for him, take what he can get, and move on. Will you testify if the case goes to trial? Absolutely. He needs to be stopped. With Angela's testimony, the case against Brandon became even stronger. Michael filed a motion to admit evidence of prior bad acts, showing Brandon's pattern of financial exploitation. The prosecutor in the criminal case added Angela's fraud to the charges. Brandon's attorney tried to fight back. He filed motions claiming Simone had poisoned potential witnesses against his client. He requested a change of venue, arguing Brandon couldn't get a fair trial. He even tried to argue that the stress of the pending charges should delay the divorce proceedings. Judge Morrison denied every motion. Mr. Kim, she told Brandon's attorney, your client's legal troubles are of his own making. This divorce will proceed on schedule. Meanwhile, Simone was trying to rebuild her life. She'd lost 5 years to a bad marriage. She'd put her dreams on hold. She'd sacrificed her own happiness to support a man who'd never appreciated her. Now she had a chance to start over and she wasn't going to waste it. She enrolled in online nursing classes, something she'd wanted to do since before she married Brandon. The inheritance gave her the financial security to pursue her education without working herself to exhaustion. Aunt Dorothy would have loved that. She also started therapy. The betrayal had done damage she couldn't ignore. Trust issues, anxiety, constant second-guessing of her own judgment. Her therapist, Dr. Williams, helped her work through it. You were victimized by someone who was skilled at manipulation, Dr. Williams told her. That doesn't make you weak or stupid. It makes you human. I should have seen the signs, Simone said during one session. Looking back, there were so many red flags. Maybe. But you were also young, in love, and dealing with past trauma from losing your parents. Brandon exploited all of that. The fault is his, not yours. The therapy helped, but the real healing came from taking action. Every legal victory, every piece of evidence that vindicated her, every time she stood up to intimidation, she felt a little bit stronger. A little bit more like herself. 2 months after the separation, Brandon's trial date was set. 6 months away, which gave both sides time to prepare. In the meantime, the divorce proceedings continued. Brandon's attorney tried to drag things out, filing endless motions and requesting multiple continuances, but Judge Morrison wasn't having it. "This case is straightforward," she said during one particularly contentious hearing. "The inheritance is separate property. There are no children. Both parties have income. We're moving forward." As the divorce progressed, more details of Brandon's financial mismanagement came out. He'd been fired from his job 3 months ago and hadn't told Simone. He'd been living off credit cards and loans from his family. The consulting business he'd claimed to be building didn't exist. It had all been lies. "He was broke," Rebecca, the forensic accountant, told Simone. "Has been for at least a year. That's why he was so desperate for your inheritance. He's drowning in debt." Simone should have felt vindicated, but she just felt sad. 5 years with a man she'd never really known. 5 years believing in a partnership that was actually a long con. 5 years of her life she'd never get back. But she also felt something else, relief. Because if he'd gotten away with it, if she'd given in to the pressure and handed over the inheritance, he would have bankrupted her. Would have taken everything and left her with nothing. Aunt Dorothy's protection had saved her from total ruin. On what would have been their 6th wedding anniversary, Simone received the final divorce papers. The marriage was officially over. Brandon got nothing. Not a penny of the inheritance. Not half the apartment, nothing. Judge Morrison had been clear. His criminal actions forfeited any claim to marital assets. Simone signed the papers in Patricia's office, her hands steady. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked. "Free," Simone said simply. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." That night, she went to Aunt Dorothy's grave. She hadn't been there since the funeral, couldn't face it while everything was chaos. But now, with the divorce finalized and the criminal trial upcoming, she felt ready. She sat on the grass in front of the headstone and talked to her aunt like she used to. Told her everything that had happened. Thanked her for the wisdom to protect the inheritance. Cried for the years she'd lost but celebrated the strength she'd found. "You saved me," Simone said to the headstone. "You saved me even after you were gone. And I promise you, Aunt Dorothy, I'm going to use what you gave me to help other people. So your gift doesn't just protect me. It protects everyone I can reach." A breeze rustled the trees around the cemetery, and Simone chose to believe it was her aunt's way of saying she approved. 3 months later, Simone sat in the courthouse waiting for Brandon's trial to begin. The criminal case had taken priority over everything else. If convicted, he'd face up to 10 years in prison for the multiple fraud charges. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Maria Gonzalez, had built an ironclad case. But the morning of the trial, everything changed. Simone was in the hallway outside the courtroom when Michael Torres appeared, looking excited. "We need to talk. Right now." They found an empty conference room. Michael pulled out his laptop and opened a folder full of documents. "Remember how we've been investigating Brandon and Tiffany's background? Well, our investigator found something major. They've done this before. Multiple times." "What do you mean?" "Brandon and Tiffany have been running this scam for at least 4 years. They target women with money. Brandon starts a relationship. Tiffany poses as his business partner or sometimes his sister. They work together to isolate the victim and extract money. You're victim number 4 that we know of." Simone felt sick. 4 women. At least, Angela was one. There's another woman in California who lost $150,000. Another in Texas who gave them $50,000. And there may be more we haven't found yet. Why didn't these women report it? Some did. But Brandon and Tiffany were careful. They'd get the women to give them money willingly, through loans or investments that seemed legitimate. Hard to prosecute when the victim hands over the money voluntarily, even if they were manipulated into it. But this time they got sloppy, Simone said, understanding. The credit cards were outright fraud. No gray area. Exactly. And the messages we found showed their whole operation. They didn't expect anyone to dig this deep. Michael pulled up police reports from the other victims. Each story was heartbreakingly similar. Brandon would meet them, charm them, make them fall in love. Then he'd introduce some financial need, always framed as an opportunity. A business investment. A loan to tide him over. A chance to be partners in something amazing. The woman in California, Simone read from the report, Her name was Denise. Brandon told her he needed money to start a consulting firm. She gave him $150,000. He disappeared 3 months later. When she tried to report it, the police said it was a civil matter, not criminal. But now we have evidence it's part of a pattern, Michael said. The prosecutor wants to bring in these other victims to testify. Show the jury this wasn't a one-time mistake or a misunderstanding. This is what Brandon does for a living. The revelation changed everything. The trial, which had been scheduled for 2 weeks, was postponed while the prosecution brought in the additional victims and evidence. Brandon's attorney tried to fight it, claiming the prior acts were prejudicial, but the judge allowed it. This shows clear pattern and intent, Judge Morrison ruled. The jury has a right to understand the defendant's history. Over the next month, Simone met with the other victims. It was painful hearing their stories, seeing herself reflected in their experiences. But it was also empowering. Together they were stronger than Brandon had ever been. As Brandon was led away in handcuffs, he finally looked at Simone. She stared back, keeping her face neutral. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry or gloat. She just looked at him with the same indifference he'd shown her. Outside the courthouse, the 4 victims stood together as media cameras flashed. Maria Gonzalez made a statement about the importance of reporting financial fraud, of not being ashamed when you're victimized by someone skilled at manipulation. These women are heroes, Maria said. They came forward, they testified, and they stopped a con artist from hurting anyone else. That takes courage. A reporter called out to Simone. How do you feel about the verdict? Simone stepped forward. I feel relieved. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted justice. For myself, for the other women he hurt, and for anyone he might have targeted in the future. Con artists count on their victims being too ashamed to come forward. But we're not ashamed. We were targeted by someone who made lying and stealing a career. The shame is his, not ours. That night, Simone went home to her apartment, now truly hers alone. She made dinner, poured a glass of wine, and allowed herself to finally relax. The trial was over. Brandon was going to prison. The divorce was finalized. She was free. Her phone buzzed. A text from Denise. Thank you for bringing us all together. I felt so alone with this for years. Tonight, I feel like I can finally move forward. Similar messages came from Martha and Patricia. They'd formed a bond through their shared trauma. They were already talking about starting a support group for fraud victims, maybe even a foundation to help others avoid what they'd been through. Simone looked at Aunt Dorothy's letter, which she'd framed and hung on her wall. This is yours. You've earned it through every sacrifice you made. The inheritance had cost her a marriage, but it had given her something more valuable, the truth. And now she was going to use it to make sure other women didn't have to go through what she and the others had endured. The war wasn't over yet. Tiffany's trial was coming. Diane's case was still pending. But the biggest battle had been won. And Simone was standing stronger than ever. 2 weeks after Brandon's conviction, Simone received a call from Detective Lopez. Tiffany's attorney reached out. She wants to make a deal. What kind of deal? She'll plead guilty to conspiracy and fraud charges in exchange for a lighter sentence. But there's a condition. She has to provide testimony against everyone else involved, including Diane and Jerome. I thought Jerome already testified. He testified about his involvement and Brandon's operation. But there's more. Tiffany knows about other schemes Diane's been running independently. If she talks, we might be able to bring down the whole operation. Simone met with Maria Gonzalez to discuss the plea deal. The prosecutor was cautiously optimistic. Tiffany's looking at 8 to 12 years if she goes to trial, Maria explained. With the deal, she'd do 4 years and 5 years probation. She's scared. Prison is not going to be easy for someone who's lived by manipulating people. What exactly does she know about Diane? According to her attorney, Diane's been running elder exploitation schemes for years. She works as a caregiver, gains the trust of elderly clients, then manipulates them into changing their wills or giving her money. She's done it at least 7 times that Tiffany knows about. Simone felt sick. How has she gotten away with it? The victims are elderly, often with cognitive decline. Their families assumed the gifts or will changes were legitimate. By the time anyone questions it, Diane's moved on to the next victim. It's hard to prosecute because the victims often die before cases are fully investigated. So Tiffany can prove all this? She has documents. Photos of falsified paperwork. Text messages with Diane discussing their clients. It's substantial evidence. The plea deal was accepted. Tiffany was sentenced to 4 years in prison, with the understanding that her sentence could be reduced further if her testimony led to additional convictions. She'd have to testify against Diane, against other co-conspirators, and provide every piece of evidence she had. Her first testimony came during Diane's trial, which started a month after Brandon's sentencing. Simone attended every day, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching as the matriarch of Brandon's family was exposed as the criminal she'd always been. Diane's defense attorney tried to paint her as a confused older woman who'd simply been helping people. But Tiffany's testimony was devastating. Diane taught Brandon everything he knew, Tiffany said from the witness stand. She'd been running cons since before he was born. She saw him as her protege. When Brandon and I started working together, Diane helped us refine our approach. Told us what worked, what didn't. How to spot vulnerable targets. And what about her own activities? The prosecutor asked. She specialized in elderly victims. People who were lonely, whose families didn't visit often. She'd get hired as their caregiver, become their closest companion, then slowly isolate them from everyone else. By the time she'd manipulated them into changing their will, they were completely dependent on her. The prosecutor presented evidence of 7 different victims over 15 years. Elderly people who'd changed their wills to leave everything to Diane. Families who'd been shocked to discover their parents had disinherited them in favor of a caregiver they'd known for less than a year. One of those family members, a man named Robert Chin, whose mother had left Diane $200,000, testified through tears. My mother had Alzheimer's. She barely knew who I was by the end. But somehow she signed a new will, leaving everything to Diane. When I questioned it, Diane had a lawyer friend of hers confirm the will was legitimate. It took me 2 years to prove my mother wasn't mentally competent when she signed it. By then the money was gone. The courtroom was silent as Robert spoke. Simone watched Diane's face, looking for any sign of remorse. There was none. Just cold calculation. Even now. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, they found Diane guilty on 5 counts of elder exploitation and fraud. The other cases had too much time passed to prosecute, but 5 was enough. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. Mrs. Baker, you preyed on the most vulnerable members of our society. You stole from people who trusted you, who depended on you for their care. You betrayed that trust in the most callous way possible. The court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison. Diane's face went white. 12 years at her age was essentially a life sentence. She'd likely die in prison. As she was led away, she looked at Simone with pure hatred. This is your fault, she hissed. If you'd just shared the money like you were supposed to, none of this would have happened. Simone stared back calmly. No. This is your fault for thinking you could steal from me. For thinking I was weak enough to be manipulated. You underestimated me, and now you're paying the price. With Diane convicted, the focus shifted to Jerome. His plea deal meant he avoided prison, but he faced 5 years probation and had to pay restitution to all the victims he'd helped defraud. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and his freedom to leave the state without permission. Lauren, his wife, filed for divorce. She came to see Simone one last time before moving back to her home state. I'm sorry for my part in all this, Lauren said. I should have spoken up sooner. You spoke up when it mattered, Simone replied. You helped stop them. That takes courage. What will you do now? I'm going to use my inheritance the way my aunt would have wanted. I'm going to help people. Over the next few months, the media coverage of the case was extensive. A family of con artists brought down by one woman who refused to be a victim. Articles were written, think pieces published. Some criticized Simone for being too harsh, for pursuing criminal charges instead of just divorcing Brandon and moving on. But most people understood. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. The other victims, Denise, Martha, and Patricia, got some measure of closure too. While they couldn't recover all the money they'd lost, the conviction gave them validation. They hadn't been foolish. They'd been targeted by professionals. Brandon's sentencing came last. Given his extensive criminal history and the number of victims, he received the maximum, 10 years in federal prison. He'd be in his mid-40s when released, with a felony record that would follow him forever. At the sentencing hearing, Simone gave a victim impact statement. She'd thought carefully about what to say, wanting to find the right words to capture what Brandon had taken from her. Your Honor, she began, Brandon Baker didn't just steal my money. He stole 5 years of my life. He stole my trust in people. He stole my aunt's final gift to me, not the money itself, but the peace of mind she wanted me to have. When I met Brandon, I was young and hopeful. I believed in love and partnership. He saw those beliefs as weaknesses to exploit. He turned my kindness into a weapon against me. Used my grief as an opportunity. But here's what he didn't understand. The same aunt who left me that inheritance also taught me to be strong. To stand up for myself. To refuse to be a victim. She taught me that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to let bad people get away with hurting others. I'd love to. Let's set up a partnership. The collaboration with Gabrielle's shelter was just the first. Soon, the foundation was working with organizations across the state, providing financial education workshops, legal consultations, and direct financial assistance to women trying to escape abusive situations. Simone also started a blog, sharing her story and providing resources for others. The blog attracted thousands of readers. Women would email her, thanking her for speaking openly about financial abuse, for making them feel less alone. One email in particular stuck with her. It was from a woman named Jessica who'd read about Simone's case in the news. "Your story saved my life," Jessica wrote. "My husband was pressuring me to give him access to an inheritance I received. I kept thinking I was being selfish, that married people should share everything. But after reading about your case, I realized he was showing the same red flags Brandon showed. I found out he'd been having an affair and planning to divorce me once he got the money. Because of your courage to speak up, I protected myself. Thank you." Simone printed that email and hung it on her office wall. This was why she'd fought so hard. Not just for herself, but for women like Jessica who needed to see that standing up to financial abuse was possible and necessary. Her personal life was healing too. She'd completed her nursing degree online and gotten a part-time job at a hospital, balancing it with her work at the foundation. She'd reconnected with old friends she'd lost touch with during her marriage. She'd built a support system of strong, genuine people. Therapy had helped too. Dr. Williams had guided her through the trauma of betrayal and into a place of genuine healing. Simone no longer blamed herself for trusting Brandon. She understood she'd been targeted by someone skilled at manipulation. The shame was his, not hers. One evening, at a foundation fundraising event, Simone was giving a speech when she noticed a man watching her from the back of the room. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. When she finished speaking, he approached. "That was powerful," he said. "I'm Gabriel Cruz. I'm a financial advisor who specializes in helping people recover from fraud. I'd love to volunteer with your foundation if you're looking for help." Simone shook his hand, feeling an unexpected flutter in her chest. "We're always looking for volunteers, especially financial professionals. Do you have experience with fraud victims?" "I do. I've been helping people rebuild after financial crimes for 10 years. What you're doing here is important. I'd like to be part of it." Gabriel started volunteering at the foundation 2 days a week. He was patient with clients, understanding of their shame and fear, and skilled at explaining complex financial concepts in simple terms. He and Simone worked together often, and she found herself looking forward to the days he'd be in the office. But she was cautious. The wounds from Brandon were still fresh even months later. She'd promised herself she wouldn't rush into anything, wouldn't let her guard down too quickly. Gabriel seemed to understand. He was friendly but respectful, never pushy or overly familiar. They became colleagues, then friends, sharing coffee breaks and occasional lunches to discuss foundation business. One day, after they'd finished a particularly difficult case involving a woman who'd lost her life savings to a con artist, Gabriel asked Simone if she wanted to get dinner. "Just dinner?" he said quickly. "As friends? You've been working so hard, and I thought you might enjoy a meal where you don't have to think about work." Simone hesitated, then agreed. They went to a small Italian restaurant, casual and comfortable. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from their families to their dreams for the future. "Can I ask you something personal?" Gabriel said over dessert. "Okay. What made you start the foundation? I mean, after everything you went through, a lot of people would have just taken their inheritance and tried to forget the whole thing." Simone thought about it. "My aunt worked her whole life saving that money. She wanted it to give me security, yes, but she also raised me to believe that when you're blessed, you have a responsibility to help others. Brandon tried to take that inheritance, but instead, his actions showed me exactly what I should do with it. Turn something ugly into something good. That's remarkable. You took your pain and transformed it into purpose. I had good examples. My aunt never let bitterness win. When she talked about her failed marriage, she didn't dwell on the hurt. She focused on what she learned and how it made her stronger. That's what I'm trying to do." As weeks turned into months, Simone's life found a new rhythm. Foundation work filled her days with purpose. Her nursing work kept her connected to direct patient care, which she loved. Her friendships deepened. Her therapy sessions became less frequent as she healed. And slowly, carefully, her friendship with Gabriel evolved into something more. He never pushed, never rushed her. He seemed to understand that trust would take time to rebuild. One evening, a year after Brandon's conviction, Gabriel took Simone back to the park where Aunt Dorothy used to take her as a child. They sat on the same bench where Simone had so many important conversations with her aunt. "I know you're still healing," Gabriel said. "And I respect that. But I need you to know that I care about you. Not about your inheritance, not about what you can do for me. About you. The person who turned tragedy into triumph. The woman who helps others every day. That's who I see." Simone looked at him, really looked at him. She saw kindness in his eyes. Patience. Genuine feeling. And she realized she was ready. Not to dive into something intense, but to take small steps toward trusting again. "I care about you too," she said. "But I need to take this slow. As slow as you want. I'm not going anywhere." They sat on that bench as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing, and Simone felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope for herself, but hope that good things were still possible. That trust could be rebuilt. That love, real love, might still be out there. The foundation continued to grow. In its first year they helped over 200 women. The following year they expanded to 3 cities. They partnered with law schools to provide legal students with real-world experience while offering free legal services to victims. Simone became a recognized voice in the movement against financial abuse. She testified before legislative committees about the need for better protections. She worked with banks to improve their fraud detection systems. She wrote articles and gave speeches and never stopped fighting for women who were where she'd been a year ago, scared, betrayed, and wondering if justice was possible. The answer she could now say with certainty was yes. Justice was possible. Healing was possible. And turning pain into purpose was the most powerful thing anyone could do. 1 year and 3 months after Brandon's conviction, Simone stood at the podium of a large conference hall, looking out at 500 women attending the Dorothy Mitchell Foundation's first annual conference. The theme was From Victim to Victor, and the day was filled with workshops, speakers, and support groups. "When my aunt left me her inheritance," Simone said to the crowd, "she gave me more than money. She gave me a foundation to build on. A platform to stand on. The security to take risks and fight back when I needed to." Today, the Dorothy Mitchell Foundation has helped over 400 women escape financial abuse, prosecute fraud, and rebuild their lives. And we're just getting started. The applause was thunderous. In the front row sat Denise, Martha, and Patricia, the other victims from Brandon's trial. Next to them were Nicole and Jessica, and dozens of other women the foundation had helped. In the back sat Gabriel, watching with pride. After the conference, Simone drove to the cemetery. It had become her ritual whenever something significant happened. She'd visit Aunt Dorothy's grave and share the news, ask for advice, or simply sit in the peaceful quiet. "We did it, Aunt Dorothy," Simone said, sitting cross-legged on the grass. "Your money didn't just protect me. It's protecting hundreds of women. Giving them the resources to fight back, to escape, to survive. You saved so many lives beyond just mine." Her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Lopez. "Thought you'd want to know. Brandon's being transferred to a facility in Oregon tomorrow. Fresh start far from here." Simone stared at the message. Brandon would be in prison for another 8 years. She'd thought she'd feel something hearing about him, some residual anger or satisfaction. But she felt nothing. He was irrelevant to her life now. Just a chapter that had closed. She did feel something about his victims though. About the women who'd come after her testimony, sharing their stories. About the fact that stopping him had protected countless other women from being his next targets. That evening she had dinner with Gabriel. They'd been dating for 6 months now, taking it slow just like she'd needed. He'd been patient, understanding, respectful of her boundaries. She was learning to trust again, one day at a time. "I have something to tell you," Gabriel said over dinner. "I've been offered a job in Chicago. Really good position, more money, great benefits." Simone's heart sank. "When would you start?" "That's the thing. I turned it down." "Why?" "Because my life is here. The foundation work I love. My friends. I know we're taking things slow, and I'm not expecting any declarations or commitments. But I wanted you to know that I choose this. I choose being here." Simone felt tears prick her eyes. Not sad tears, but grateful ones. "Thank you for telling me. And Gabriel, I want you to know that I'm ready. Not to rush anything, but to actually build something real with you. to trust that what we have is genuine. They spent the evening talking about the future. Gabriel's ideas for expanding the Foundation's financial education programs. Simone's dream of writing a book about her experience to help more women. Their shared vision of a world where financial abuse was taken as seriously as physical abuse. The next morning, Simone woke up early and went for a run through her neighborhood. The apartment she'd shared with Brandon was long gone. She'd moved to a beautiful place near the Foundation's office, decorated exactly how she wanted it. Every piece of furniture was chosen by her. Every picture on the wall reflected her taste. It was completely and wholly hers. At work, her staff had prepared a surprise. The Foundation had received a major grant from a women's rights organization, enough to fund their operations for the next 3 years and expand to 5 more cities. "We're going to help thousands of women," Ruth said, tears in her eyes. "Do you realize that? Thousands of women who might have stayed trapped, who might have lost everything. We're giving them a way out." Simone looked around the office at the team she'd built. Survivors who'd become advocates. Lawyers who believed in justice. Counselors who understood trauma. Together, they were creating something that would outlast all of them. That afternoon, she received a call from Maria Gonzalez, the prosecutor. "I wanted to give you an update," Maria said. "Remember how we discussed expanding the investigation into other fraud rings? Well, we've identified 3 more networks operating similar schemes. Your case has become a blueprint for how to investigate and prosecute these kinds of organized fraud operations. You've changed how we approach these crimes. So other women will have an easier time getting justice?" "Exactly. Because of your willingness to come forward and fight, the system is better prepared to help the next victim. That's your legacy, Simone." Later that week, Simone received an invitation to speak at a law school about financial fraud and victim advocacy. After her talk, a young woman approached her, a third-year law student with determined eyes. "I'm writing my thesis on financial abuse prosecution," the student said. "Your case inspired me to specialize in this area. I want to be the kind of lawyer who helps women like you." Simone smiled. "The world needs more lawyers like that. If you're interested, the Foundation has an internship program. We could use someone with your passion." That moment crystallized everything for Simone. This was the ripple effect Aunt Dorothy had hoped for. One act of protection, one woman's foresight, had created waves that would touch countless lives for years to come. On the 2nd anniversary of Aunt Dorothy's death, Simone organized a memorial event at the park she'd loved. Friends, family, Foundation staff, and clients attended. They shared stories of how Aunt Dorothy's legacy had impacted them. Nicole, the teacher who'd been the Foundation's first client, spoke tearfully about how the Foundation had helped her escape an abusive relationship and rebuild her life. She'd just been promoted to vice principal and was financially stable for the first time in years. Martha, one of Brandon's victims, talked about finally being able to trust again, about the healing that came from seeing justice served. Gabriel talked about how Aunt Dorothy's wisdom had created not just a foundation for Simone, but a foundation for an entire movement of women helping women. When it was Simone's turn to speak, she pulled out Aunt Dorothy's letter, which she'd brought with her. "My aunt wrote me that money reveals people's true character," Simone said. She was right. The inheritance she left me revealed who Brandon really was. But it also revealed who I could be. Strong enough to fight back. Brave enough to speak up. Dedicated enough to help others. She told me not to let anyone guilt me into giving away my foundation. She was talking about the money, yes, but also about the foundation she'd built in me through years of love and guidance. That foundation of strength, independence, and compassion. That's what I'm building on now. Aunt Dorothy, if you can hear me, I want you to know your gift has multiplied. It's not $2 million helping one person anymore. It's a movement helping thousands. Your 40 years of savings are changing lives every single day. That's the return on your investment. That's your legacy. As the sun set over the park, Simone felt complete peace. The nightmare that had started with a family meeting and a terrible revelation had transformed into something beautiful. She'd survived betrayal, fought for justice, and turned her pain into purpose. Her phone buzzed one last time. An email from a woman in another state who just discovered her partner was trying to access her inheritance. "I found your story online. I know what to do now because you showed me it's possible to fight back. Thank you for giving me hope." Simone closed her eyes and smiled. This was victory. Not revenge against Brandon, not satisfaction at his punishment. But this, other women finding hope, finding strength, finding their own foundations to stand on. She'd started this journey as a victim. She'd become a survivor. And now she was a victor, not because she'd defeated her enemy, but because she'd created something good from something terrible. As she walked to her car with Gabriel beside her, her phone in one hand and Aunt Dorothy's letter carefully folded in her pocket, Simone knew with absolute certainty that she'd made her aunt proud. The inheritance had been protected. The money was being used wisely. And most importantly, the values Aunt Dorothy had instilled, about strength and independence and helping others, were living on. The story that had begun with betrayal had ended with triumph. Not the triumph of revenge, but the triumph of transformation. And that was the best ending Simone could have imagined.